If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, by which no one was ever truly harmed. It is the person who continues in his self deception and ignorance who is harmed. Marcus Aurelius. All right, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Full Metal Cast. It has been long overdue. I have been very bad about getting content out and recording and editing episodes, mostly due to teaching myself how to sew. The carry on slings were a huge hit. Thank you to everyone who purchased one and who participated in the giveaway. Congrats to Ryan, our winner of the Benchmade Mini SOCP or SOCP Mini, however they want to say it. We do have a second one actually that I acquired with the first one that we gave away. So with the next round of slings or whatever I decide to push out next, we'll do another Benchmade giveaway because that was a hit and just a ton of fun. So that being said, we're going to kick things off tonight talking about something that has been near and dear to my heart that I've taken a great liking to, which is bashing Boeing and the airlines. However, I'm going to attack it from a somewhat different angle this time. And so to recap, as of today, the 19th of February, there have been 87 plane crashes so far since the start of 2025 in the US, four of which resulted in the deaths of 85 people. So 87 plane crashes, 85 deaths in the US to start 2025. And the angle I'm going to approach this at this time around is a just examining the overall lack of value for human life. And that's really the only way how things are allowed to proceed the way that they have been as relates to air travel. There are other examples that I may tease and get to with this sort of flavor. But there's no way that these things, these planes flying out of the sky, the landing failures, the pilot errors, the manufacturing flaws, the air traffic control dropping the ball from the top down, from the federal government to the local government to the regulators, the manufacturers, the pilots, the flight crew, you name it. There's no way any of this could possibly be happening unless unless there was a legal system or a penal system that was not severe enough to prevent this thing from happening. So, like, what would the punishments be for pilots, airlines, manufacturers, regulators, air traffic controllers, whatever, like I said, whose negligence resulted in losses of life? I don't really know. I'm not here to speculate that or to say how that should be handled. All I know is that it's clearly not severe enough. And I guess we'll get into one of the examples, but like the healthcare system, look at the Sackler family. there's we didn't see heads rolling for the opioid crisis. We never got our pound of flesh for the irreparable mental and physical health damages that were caused through mandates and lockdowns during COVID. And similarly, in the airline entire sphere, the industry, if you will, there's been just a slap on the wrist for the people involved, Boeing, the manufacturers, a legal fine, 24 hours or less of bad press, and then they can get right back to work making money for themselves, for their shareholders, for the politicians whose pocket that they line. And because it is a service that we rely on, because there's so much other shit going on in the lives of Americans, we don't really have time to speculate, to really weigh out, the consequences of, hey, maybe flying isn't as safe as it used to be anymore. You have quietly accepted the fact that you are seen as subhuman to these industries, zeroing in on airlines. Your life is simply can be, I guess, narrowed down into a legal fee to settle out of court, just a small lump sum for these individuals and these corporations as their way of saying, oopsies, sorry, maybe it won't happen again. But even if it does, we already have legal precedent to go off of that will sort of keep us all out of jail and we'll still be able to continue operating as usual. That's obviously extremely frustrating. Um, Path forward obviously isn't optimal either, especially for anyone who needs to travel or who likes to travel. It's not really feasible just to jump in a car or any other form of transportation and get somewhere, especially with how convenient it is to fly. I think we are in a bit of a pinnacle moment, if you will. Um, you can bash government and FAA all you want, like I did last administration. I'm not going to hold this one to the fire as well for it carrying on the way it has been. I haven't seen any statements. I'm sure all of the terminations that were carried out throughout the government agencies at the start of the God Emperor's term also resulted in many individuals results who had their hands in the sort of air safety sphere being let go, and I'm sure that also contributed to many of these crashes, which may be why we haven't seen any statements put out. um, but this topic also starts to bring back the sort of declining empire state. We've made it to a point where we've sort of lost the thread. We've ignored merit and the weight that it carries and the consequences that happen when we decide to substitute it with something that is just sort of meaningless and empty. And you see the consequences now playing out in fields where um, life and death are the actual things at stake. Um, so, what happens? I don't know. It can continue to get worse or it can get better. I'm not sure how long it's going to take to do so. But I think decentralizing and taking the things with, or I guess trying to move as many things within your sphere of control as possible is always going to be a good move. Again, I did say, you know, just giving up flying altogether may not be feasible for everyone. Although, with the way things are trending in the world of finances and inflation, flying may be a thing of the past for everyone because it just may be too expensive, just like owning a house. So, who knows? Um, but again, not here to say how to punish these people, not here to say how to go about doing it, other than sort of looking at the blueprint, the stoic blueprint, if you will, for life, controlling your controllables, not stressing the things outside of your control, and then striving to move more things into your sphere of your control if you have the means and the desire to do so, is always going to result in positive outcomes. That being said, I do have a trip to Colorado planned the first week of March. And I won't lie, even in a very pro Trump household, my parents obviously lean very far to the right, very proudly conservative. Um, they are not too thrilled to be flying, honestly. And we're going to have a little chat on Sunday to see how we want to proceed. Because, whether it's just increased media coverage, it doesn't feel like it though, with just the number of crashes. It seems to be less safer to fly. And it's not just Boeing's fault this time, it seems, especially with that Canada flight. The clip of it, landing and then flipping over, that was attributed to pilot error. You can see it in the footage as well. The rear landing gear hit the runway way too hard, causing it to fail and give out. Um, and I do think the most reasonable explanation for that was the fact that it was very snowy. There's ice everywhere. It's very cloudy. I think the pilot's depth perception may have been off. Regardless, still unacceptable outcome. If you're a pilot and you have everyone's lives in your hand, you cannot make that mistake, and you should be stripped of your wings. You should never be allowed to fly again. It's the same treatment that cops should get and priests should get for that matter as well. You make one oopsie or fuck up on the job, your badge is done. You can no longer be law enforcement. You can no longer command that power over other people. And I really don't need to get into the gruesome details of what happens if you're a priest and you fuck it up. But yeah, treat them all the same at that point. If you get one strike and you're out, people trust you blindly because there's really no other options in those cases when it comes to law enforcement, aviation, fuck it, doctors, surgeons, religious leaders, and whatnot. You have convinced people, or people are left with no other option than to go to you for the services that you are rendering. And in many of those cases, people entrust you with their lives. And if you do not deliver the quality of service that is demanded of the people that you serve, and in all of those cases, in all of these positions, you do take oaths, they are considered service industry positions, whether they be, of higher education, require a larger barrier to entry, regardless, your job is to render a service at a level of quality that is acceptable, and that sort of acceptance level isn't set, it's not set by anyone other than the people who you are delivering it to. And if they decide it's not good enough, then not only at a bare minimum you need to be stripped of your ability to render said services down the road, only because there is no other option for people to go to. And obviously, I am someone who's very much a proponent of freedom of choice, no matter what. However, if we are forced to live in the system that we live in today, that's how it's got to go. Otherwise, you see what's happening now. Um, Again, airlines being the only example. So, yeah, that being said, am I still going to fly next month or in a couple of weeks from now? Probably. Um, Godspeed to everyone else who is as well. Anywho, staying on a similar but different note, Doge has obviously been running rampant. And as someone who is a proponent of less government, it's obviously one half of it's like, yes, very cool, burn it all down. But we're not burning it all down. We're simply burning down political opponents and aspects of the government that a specific billionaire does not like or is not fond of. Um, and that sort of omnipotent power left to just one person, let alone a billionaire, isn't something that I'm very fond of, nor is it something that anyone should really be fond of, because once again, it's not the people picking and choosing. And sure, will he undoubtedly recover inefficiencies and corruption within the state? Yeah, absolutely. Is it of net benefit to route that out? Well, that depends, I think, right? Because sure, we can use any example, right? Find, all the USAID shit, right? Any USAID example, Iraqi Sesame Street, let's just zero in on the millions of dollars that were spent to stand up a Middle Eastern version of Sesame Street that appeals to the children out there. Millions and millions of tax dollars were spent on that. And when you find out, when you read the headline, you see the clips that this is what Doge uncovered and that they finally shut this down, and everyone's pumping their fists and cheering and sharing the memes, which are objectively hilarious. It's good. The only good thing I can pull from that is, okay, cool. We stopped trying to be the bully overseas, trying to influence culture and government outcomes and social outcomes that really have no bearing over my life here, that benefit me in no which way. So ending it, yeah, sure. That's sort of a secondhand positive that I'll take. But at the end of the day, all these efficiencies, which is what this unofficial office is striving for, all these cost savings that they're now tracking next to the debt counter, it's all rather empty, like a political promise. And I say that because we're just expected that the economic benefits of these efficiencies and these cost cuttings will just trickle down to us over the course of an unknown amount of time, an unknown period, an unknown time horizon or goalpost that we just have to accept and wait with open hands and smiles on our faces that will be blessed by the economic benefits to come from this. Meanwhile, the more straightforward and I think efficient method of delivering a net benefit from these cuts would be to start cutting checks to the people whose money you are now recovering or saving, quote unquote. These are my tax dollars that went towards Iraqi Sesame Street, that went towards teaching the people in Nepal about atheism. Pick any of the crazy USAID initiatives or anything else that they're finding now, Social Security, whatever it is, either create a tax holiday for several years to come, over your term. Every year, hey, you have to file federal income taxes. That's a win. Or, hey, here's a check for, the portion of your taxes that were used for shit that you didn't sign off on, that had no benefit or that actually negatively impacted you. But instead, no, we are going to just use these little headlines as political wins. We'll throw them up on Fox News, we'll throw them up on our social medias platforms, and everyone will cheer and be happy. But the people who are cheering and that are happy about it are only happy about it because it strokes this emotional tie to a political party or political figure, their idol, if you will. There's no benefit being passed down to you from the Department of Government Efficiency so far. And if it does come out that maybe that helicopter colliding with that plane was a result of, a Doge job cut, I'd say a net negative in that case, because that's a passenger plane, I do believe, that collided with a military helicopter. And so that's a direct impact on the sort of the public from the negligence of that. And then the pushback on that, or a common thing that I see getting shared online, is, a lot of people are claiming I didn't vote for Elon. And then the boomer, the right wing, the Republican sort of pushback is, yeah, well, I didn't vote for the FBI, the ATF, the CIA, PBS, NPR, FDA, WHO, UN, IRS, Federal Reserve, EPA, or CDC. Cry harder, snowflake sort of thing. Yeah. Um, you listed some really atrocious government agencies that I did not ask for, that I do not vote for the heads of, that just can control and make up regulation as they wish. And so Musk throwing himself in the mix of that grab bag of hellish institutions doesn't really put him in great company. And I wouldn't really use those as justification for his existence or his purpose in this administration and what he's doing today. Um, it's sort of a non sequitur in that sense. You sort of proved the point in that way. The people who are saying I didn't vote for Musk surely don't like the other agencies because they've all been net negative so far, from what I can gather. FBI, ATF, CIA, things seem a little more dangerous than usual. They've failed to stop any school shooting that has ever taken place. FDA, WHO, CDC, whatever. We're all sicker and more out of shape and less mentally healthy than we ever have been. And then if we want to look at the IRS, the Federal Reserve, et cetera, inflation's out of fucking control, government spending's out of control, and the debt counter has only been growing higher anyways. All this to say that the government has never been efficient, will never be efficient, and putting one man, one billionaire, at the head of this department who is suddenly going to make it all better is an absolute insane idea. It just cannot work. And now we've sort of entered, again, similar to the pinnacle example I threw out there with the airline industry, where we've reached this point where it sort of seems like a tipping point where it can just completely spiral out of control and every flight turns into a 50-50 coin toss, or it starts getting better and just returning back to the glory days of flying. We're now there with, or maybe it's not, maybe we're just back to square one, but I see this now as a bit of a tipping point regarding the political temperature. And I get it, for the most part, most people are going to be red or blue no matter who. That's it. They can't be swayed, their minds can't be changed, logic goes out the window. um and these are the same, and honestly, these are the people who would watch Fast and Furious and think it's a documentary, because that's the same amount of disbelief or suspension of reality that you need to hold to read into and look at politics and take it at face value and believe in it and trust it as if, it's anything that's being said is truthful. Anything that's being said or done operates within the realm of reason, objectivity, and reality. That's how that works. And so now we're at the point where, I've seen a lot of people who claim to be in the gray, in sort of the black mass, if you will. And again, the black mass is the growing portion of the voter map, if you will. Every election night, you see the map turning red and blue. More and more people are becoming disenfranchised, I think, because, and again, people's attention spans are very, very short. So 4 years, very long time for people to forget that it really doesn't matter what the last guy did or what this guy did. It's not getting better for you regardless of who sits in the fucking chair. But I do see, and did believe rather, that there was this growing mass of people, this black mass on this map of red and blue states, of people who felt disenfranchised, of people who felt that the state, or the federal and the local level, had completely turned their backs, and we were just watching politicians, some of the worst people among us, the least qualified among us, take these positions simply to pocket money for themselves at your expense. And these people found ways to, again, grow their sphere of influence and move more things into it, whether that be, buying firearms and training, whether that be taking their health into their own hands, their food source, their water source, whatever it is. And these little steps, it sounds extreme to say they're, you know, moving off the grid, or, they're completely, turning into an extremist and anti-statist like this. But no, eating healthy and watching what you eat, and just not following blindly these institutions that are supposed to be in charge of making sure that the food that gets sold at the grocery stores is healthy and not going to kill you. um, I count those in that mass, because you have to have a level of distrust of the systems and the state in place, and you put yourself above that, as you should, because nobody can possibly care for you. Nobody can possibly judge the acceptability of a level of service provided, like we went over when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to flying, other than yourself. And so to outsource that to somebody who simply won the world's least transparent popularity contest by promising the most amount of kickbacks to the richest people on earth is absolutely insane. But to bring that back, we're at the point now where a lot of people who I thought were in that black mass area had put on a fake hat during the last administration. A lot of people who were seemed to be two-way absolutists, who seemed to be freedom absolutists, no matter what, quickly took off the black hat, if you will, and put on the red hat. Extremely discouraging, especially considering how the God Emperor was responsible for passing down the most restrictive gun control legislation since the Reagan assault weapons ban, going back to the bump stock issue here. But that be damned, people who seem to be somewhat self-sufficient and moving more towards that end of the spectrum each and every day, showed their true colors as being status. And whether or not you want more government or a lesser form of government, if you want government, you're a statist. Simple as that. Red or blue, it doesn't matter. It's the redcoats versus the anarchists. And that's really the only way to look at it, because, again, the outcomes remain the same no matter who's in office. Planes were falling out of the sky when Biden and Buttigieg were in charge, and planes are still falling out of the sky at a very rapid pace this year as well, since your boy got his hands on the controls. But patriotism is this sort of mechanism that keeps people on the side of the most powerful government in the world. And again, this thought path is going to require that separation of your love of country and your love of government. You cannot love your country and love your government. They are incompatible, because your government takes the greatest aspects of your country, the beautiful landscape, its natural resources, the people, and exploit them for their own gain, their own financial gain. Best example is selling land to other countries. Obviously, the Chinese Communist Party owns a lot of farmland, which is turning out to be a very large issue now as certain food supplies become short due to natural disasters, due to diseases and whatnot. Michigan, for example, decided to take nuclear waste from New York, simply because they were promised, I think, to be paid a certain amount for it. So, yep, we'll bury that somewhere in someone's backyard because, the highest bidder decided to come forth and give us enough money to take the nuclear waste, and so on and so forth. Right? Look at the train derailments. Look at everything. It's at your expense and at your country's expense that these people grow richer uh, by the day. And now, and again, take patriotism now combined with these people's very short attention span, and these retards are now so happy that the world's worst and richest technocrats and transhumanists among us are now in power because they showed up to the God Emperor's inauguration. They, and let me remind you, we have Google, we have Facebook, X, Twitter, if you will, Amazon, the people who not only, by the way, were the most against your candidate, your president's last term. They threw him off platforms. They deplatformed him. They slandered him in the press. They threw all of the resources at their disposal against him to paint him in a bad picture. And yet you somehow managed to forget about that. But now that they're on his side and that they carry so much influence, you could not be happier to have seen them in the crowd. You cannot be happier to have them now controlling the government without any sort of checks and balances. And these people are going to usher in the security state, the social credit system, the big brother, etc., 1984, whatever the fuck you want to call it, that they all feared, that you all feared so greatly just less than a year ago when Biden was in office. The things that you were the most afraid of, that the left wing media, that the big tech companies are going to bring in, they're now no longer left wing, they're now right wing, and they're going to get exactly what they want now because they simply put on a different color hat and you bought into it. I think the best example of this happening very quickly and very early on was the Project Stargate, the I don't know how many $1 billion investment into AI infrastructure, where one of the leading projects on it will be AI vaccines. Shortly after, another bill was actually proposed to have AI write prescriptions in place of an actual doctor. Who knows, that may actually be beneficial. But in Stargate, it lays the foundations for the surveillance state. And we don't really need much help with that, especially when New York can just throw up their own cameras to enforce fees at random times of the day whenever they want to. When Michigan, this state here, when we have a new and enhanced surveillance network of cameras on certain strips of freeway with plate readers now, that you did not vote for, that you did not get a heads up on, they are just there because they just said that they wanted them there. Um, so we don't need any more help at a federal level in pushing this shit that's not going to make anything safer or better for you. It's just going to allow the state to write more tickets, throw more people in jail, grab more money from us. Um, it's not in your best interest to like and to root for these people and to hope that these people are on your side, unless again you're going to suspend that level of belief in reality to garner some support for your political party. The only way you can see this as a good thing is if you are playing the my team versus your team and you have decided to forego your own individual freedoms, your own well-being, simply to root for your sports team. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And I think that shows the flaw in the side of the status. And one of the many reasons why I could never possibly side with them on their arguments in this. And I think I was watching the news from my desk at work. Bloomberg's always on. I remember seeing a headline. It was Marco Rubio talking about the negotiations between the United States and Russia. And don't you dare tell me, if you're on the side of the status, or any side for that matter, don't you dare tell me that you're immune to the propaganda, quote unquote. Uh, but you seeing Marco Rubio behind that desk doesn't make you extremely uncomfortable leading the negotiations with Russia to end a potential nuclear conflict. You have been conditioned to think that he is even remotely qualified to know about that meeting even happening, let alone to lead it. That is absolutely absurd. This is the guy who stood on the stage next to Trump, who was bitching and moaning about each other's wives, who's done absolutely fucking nothing. Not a very strong to a supporter, I will add as well. But you can only root for these people. You can only believe in these people if you sort of stoop down to their level, which is simply student government hallway BS politics. They don't have a resume that could even get them in behind the counter at a McDonald's or a Starbucks, let alone to lead the strongest superpower in the world. And again, they only got there by promising enough kickbacks to the already richest people among us. So that was a very incoherent and not very linear rant, but hopefully it made a little bit of sense. Um, TLDR, next time you hear someone going off about how great the Doge cuts are and how awesome this is, I would just say, so when am I going to get my check for all this money that's supposedly being saved? Um, and any other answer is simply an acknowledgement that they would rather stroke their emotional tie to a political party or idol. Um, and that's sort of the summary of that. Some quick hits, though, as it's now over half hour and it's close to my bedtime. I've acquired a 3D printer, specifically a FlashForge 5M Pro. Absolute beast of a unit. Very, very cool, sleek machine with tons of features. It's actually extremely easy to use for an idiot like myself. Very much plug and play. I ended up getting it at auction. Uh, it was an Amazon sort of warehouse return auction, so a bit of a gamble, but I got it for about $200-300 less than what they sell for new. I could have gotten anything though. It could have been broken. It could have been open box. I got very lucky in that everything was still sealed and unopened and undamaged. Works like a dream. Um, I just finished a test print tonight of a grip that I want to start producing and making and selling for an affordable cost as well. Lots of R&D though to sort of get through with that first. Excuse me. Playing around with different filaments, different settings to make sure it looks the right way. But obviously, durability and strength is what I'm going to be torture testing first. Obviously, it was such a critical component. Um, Sort of linear to that, I am going to start printing off. I have 4 of them that I'm going to print in different materials and colors here. A snowboard accessory that I actually just saw on Instagram today. It's called the Shred Hook. And essentially, if you're a snowboarder, where your stomp pad would go, this thing sort of clips under your rear binding, but it looks sort of like a wave that would curl over your boot. And it just provides an extra point of leverage when you're sort of rolling, one leg out of the board, getting on and off the chairlift, sort of running through the flat portion of a hill. And it seems super cool. It's $70 though on Shredhook's site, and I thought surely someone's 3D printed this. Of course, they already have. So I bought the file from that creator for like $12. I'm going to print a few of those off and take that with us to the Colorado trip if we decide to go in March. And I figured that'd be a good way of testing the durability of various filaments in harsh conditions and lots of stress, weight, and pressure as well. So more to come on that. That'll be cool. Very much looking forward to printing off and selling a couple things as well at affordable prices. Is sort of why I got the 3D printer. I see some super safeties maybe in the future here for some fun videos to test with various filament materials as well. But yeah, any ideas on what we should be printing, let me know. Be happy to find the files and let you know how it sort of pans out. But that's sort of what I've been playing with as well. We've been making a lot of things here. We have the new sewing machine. We're cranking out slings. We have the 3D printer, putting out foregrips and other little trinkets as well. The next article, and this one is definitely worth the long read. Politico, You'd be right to never give a damn about them and to not read anything they put out, just like most established media today. However, there is a piece that was put out this week or the week before, titled "Voters Were Right About the Economy, the Data Was Wrong." And if you listen to, I forget which episode it was where I talked about these statistics on gun violence, school shootings, and whatnot, I meant there's a phrase in there that I don't know if I coined it, but I said it's a lot: statistical gaslighting. And this sort of falls into that same category. And this article, it's maybe a 10-minute read. Definitely take the time to read it. Um, the article breaks down how the headline economic figures, CPI, inflation and whatnot, have been extremely misleading since COVID. So when politicians and the news and the media go on and on saying that the economy is doing great, inflation's going down, the jobs are great, all this, that, and the other thing, um, this the research done that was laid out, and I use research in quotations here because it is it's a reporter, I guess, if you will, writing this. But it seems to be pretty sound work, I will say. So grain of salt as you read anything here. But this seems to identify with this. This seems to line up with what I'm seeing in the real world, and how everyone seems to be feeling. So obviously read it, get your gather your own thoughts about it as well. Um, but they dive into the figures and they say, no, the picture is much more grim than what the headline figures and what all the talking heads are saying. And to give sort of a quick rundown, they found that inflation is really close to, it's more than double than what I guess the headline figure would really say, taking into account the most common things that people are spending money on day to day, and weighting those appropriately. CPI is really like 2.5%, 2.5 times high. It feels to the average individual, the average consumer, you and I, the effect that CPI has on us is 2.5 times higher than what the headline figure would imply. And that's not even the craziest part. The part about employment and jobs in this is what's actually terrifying. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. I'll just pick up on this paragraph here. The writer states, I don't believe those who went into this past election taking pride in the unemployment numbers understood that the near record low unemployment figures, the figure was a mere 4.2% in November, counted homeless people doing occasional work as quote unquote employed. But the implications are powerful. If you filter the statistic to include as unemployed people who can't find anything but part time work or who make a poverty wage, roughly $25,000, the percentage is actually 23.7%. In other words, nearly one of every four workers is functionally unemployed in America today. Hardly something to celebrate. So, roughly a quarter of the folks here in this country are either unemployed or only making 25K a year because they can't find anything but part-time work throughout the year. I would not say the state is working. I would not say the system is working. I would not say the American dream is alive and well when nearly a quarter of Americans cannot find anything but part-time work, are unemployed, or unable to make more than 25K a year. Oh boy. And obviously this article is filled with other things like that take appeal. I mentioned CPI figures and inflation. Definitely read it. It's the only thing from Politico that I can lend any sort of credence to, because it just sort of lines up with what I've been seeing, hearing, and feeling myself. Curious to get your thoughts. I'm not going to read this article. This headline was just funny. Flu deaths may have surpassed COVID deaths nationwide for the first time since the start of the pandemic, early CDC data suggests. That was just a off the cuff headline that popped up on Google one morning. I did not see any news headlines about it. I did not see anyone talking about it. I have not seen anyone talking about it. I will probably not see anyone talking about it. I'm just going to leave that there. I think that headline speaks for itself, and how little attention and traction it's gotten um, does the talking for that. This one is funny. This came up a while ago, and I remember talking about it with Max from Dead Concepts, but came across as a reel on Instagram, and I had to look it up. But apparently, The Michigan DNR took it upon themselves to ruin one of the UP's greatest off-road trails. It was literally considered one of the gem of the UP, just an absolute amazing off-road course. Um, to make it handy capable, we have handy capable off-road trails now in Michigan. And I'll read two paragraphs here. But this fall, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources ordered the decimation of one of Michigan's most unique off roading trails without much warning. Using heavy machinery, most of the beautiful limestone steps at Marblehead were flattened. No longer the crown jewel of the island, the steps are now a tiny fraction of what they used to be. The work was done during the last week of August, noticed and shared online on the 29th, and by the weekend, the entire Michigan off roading community was in uproar. The DNR says the work was done so conventional vehicles could access the steps, despite the fact that this portion of trail was marked for four-wheel drive and 4x4s. Sorry, but which sedan driver was looking for an afternoon cruise on the hardest formation for off-road vehicles in Michigan? Back to my point about the state not working for you, working for themselves. How are we going to make more money off this beautiful off road trail? Let the Prius drive all over it. Let the mom in their minivan drive all over it. That's absolutely ridiculous. There's no other justification for that. There's no other way you can explain that to me to make that make sense. That's just absurd. And there's no one doing that too. You can't say the DNR gives a shit about natural resources or the environment if you just ground down natural limestone steps to accommodate more vehicles driving over it. And I'm not saying off-roading or 4x4 is a particularly great way to preserve the environment either, but deliberately taking heavy machinery to said limestone and to said natural environment to make sure more vehicles can drive over it for a profit seems to be counterintuitive as well. But that's just me. And the last bit, this has been on this list of topics for a while, but I'm finally going to say it. Joycelyn Benson, yes, if you're from the state of Michigan, you are unfortunately well aware of the name and the depression that it carries with you, because if you've ever had to step into the DMV or to the Secretary of State here, her name is all over it. She's responsible for all that. That was her only quote unquote achievement. The only thing on her public service resume for Michigan is now running for governor. um Bad news. Yep, that's just it. It's just bad news. The good news is the likelihood of her trying to get kidnapped by the FBI is probably skyrocketed. Um, that cannot happen though. If you hated this governor, let me tell you what, you're not going to be happy if Joycelyn Benson gets in. But there's nothing you can do about it because she's probably going to get it. Anyways, so just a heads up, really, about that. Nothing you can really do. I just thought that was funny, and also I guess tragically hilarious, similar to how our governor got a second term somehow, despite unable to complete the only campaign promise that she made, despite being served the golden goose, the silver platter, the perfect opportunity to actually fix the roads in Michigan, because every governor has always ran on "I'll fix the roads" as a side or a secondary sort of campaign promise. She made that her only one. And during COVID, when nobody was driving, she had the perfect opportunity, the best opportunity than any opportunity has been presented to her predecessors to actually get it done. And she didn't do it because you can't do it. The state can't do that. It's impossible. But it just sort of proves the point. And yet somehow she still gets elected for a second term. So that's why I have unwavering faith that Miss Benson will get the position, since you just seem to have the only requirement is just to fuck up somewhere during your time serving the state. And she overachieved in that department when it came to the Secretary of State. Um, and on some good news, though, since that was a very negative episode, aside from the 3D printer. Tobacco Tactical, I am splitting, or have I offered to split a membership with some of the fellas in the group chat. So we had the January shipment come in, the February shipment's out for delivery. I want to have a standing monthly episode where just the fellas who we're splitting that membership with gather. We all smoke the cigar of the month, give our thoughts on it, or we just talk about, we just shoot the shit, talk about fun stuff. Nothing necessarily negative like this. So looking for the cigar sort of roundtables, a cigar chat, the tobacco tactical club, whatever we decide to call it. I want that to sort of be like a standing series that gets laced in here at least once a month, hopefully. So hopefully, fingers crossed that can happen. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I fly to Colorado and return in one piece, and sort of, I guess, standing on the runway, the proper orientation, not upside down. Um, but yeah, sorry for that one to just be such a bitch fest, without much to offer as far as constructive paths forward. Well, I mean, I offered some stoic advice, I suppose. I'm not sure what the quote's going to be. Hopefully, find a good one to record for that. But until next week, thanks again for all of those who participated in the Benchmade giveaway, and buying the slings. It means a lot. I'm sorry it's taking so long to get them out. I should have them out by the end of this week. Again, teaching myself how to sew from the ground up using a very old sewing machine, while sewing some very new materials that weren't around at the time, in the 50s and 60s or the 70s, whenever this machine was made. But it's locked in. It's good to go now. I just appreciate your patience and your continued support. And as always, stay metal.